The UAE is pushing its digital economy even further by establishing a special government council. So let's talk about this with Dr. Michael Szanto, global economy expert. Good evening to you from Tel Aviv.
You too. Thank you for having me.
How would you rank the Middle East when it comes to digital economy? I know it's a very broad question, but I'll ask it anyway.
That is a great segue from Lebanon as an economic failure. I mean, obviously, parts of it a disaster. I mean, you're talking about bread lines and starvation and no gas. And then you look on the opposite spectrum, the United Arab Emirates, that is a very wealthy country, that is very forward-looking, as we now see with the Abraham Accords, for example. But when you look at the Middle East as a region in terms of high tech, you have one superstar, and of course that's Israel, which is killing very wealthy countries like Germany and Japan in terms of high-tech innovation. But most of the Middle East, since you talk about the region, unfortunately, economically, in general, is a disaster, of course, tragically.
Right. You know, we are trying to find the path here, mentioning the Abraham Accords, of cooperation in the new Middle East based on technology, based on the digital world. So far, it's been going on well, but slowly. Could this be a key digital economy to make the change, the big change?
Yes, I mean, it's a big part of the future for the whole world and has to be a big part of the future for the Middle East as well. It's not a totally new thing for United Arab Emirates. About a decade ago, their sovereign wealth fund bought the manufacturing arm of AMD and Global Foundries, one of the world's largest chip manufacturers. And now it went public at the end of last year. So, you know, this is not completely new. UAE attracts many people, for example, from India, Europe, United States, of course, Israel. I think it could also be a major outlet for talented Arab programmers and chip designers. So in the ideal future for the Middle East, this could be a second Silicon Valley to Israel. Israel is the Silicon Valley of the Middle East, of course. And I think that they would have to look also throughout the Arab world and start to work on developing talent in terms of programming and electrical engineering. And that could be part of a big future. But it's huge. It's a huge part of the global economy, and it has to be a huge part of the Middle Eastern economy.
And you know, one of the big questions is how do you make all parts of society enjoying the same wealth that the digital world brings with it? And that might be especially difficult in the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, clearly. I mean, I think that has to be a focus of education throughout the Middle East. But Israel is a real anomaly here in terms of innovation. Time and time again, you see these major breakthroughs, many of them that you don't really hear about in the news because they're within Intel. You know, Intel will purchase this Israeli company, or it'll be Israeli programmers or chip designers working for Intel or working for the, 50 to 100 other major American, European companies in Israel. Israel is something you can't duplicate. It is a gem. It is a unicorn in terms of innovation. But in the Arab Gulf, you have enormous financial capital. There are major global investors. They're very aggressive this way. UAE has done a lot to make their country very friendly to foreign investments. And there you see hints of other countries that become very wealthy, like a Singapore, like an Ireland. And that's part of the ecosystem of creating a very strong economy. And I think UAE is exactly on the right path. And I think the outlook for the United Arab Emirates economically is very strong. Now, picking the next big thing in technology, that's very, very hard. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the key components, like the chips, Intel chips, actually come out of Haifa or Herzliya. So Israel has had outstanding success. And I'm glad to see both countries are pairing together on this.
Yeah, and if you ask Elon Musk, maybe the sun is the next thing, right?
Yeah, I mean,
we have a lot of this here.
Well, of course, solar energy is a big thing. A lot of the manufacturing supply chain for solar has been caught up in China. We need to diversify that.
Dr. Szanto, I have to say goodbye at this point. We have a break, and thank you very much. We'll be right back.